Beyond Usability Testing, presented by Michelle O. AliCamp 2021. We'd like to thank our gold sponsors Telstra and Intopia, our silver sponsors ANZ and Coles, and our bronze sponsor How2.
Hi everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are and when you're watching. My name is Michelle O, and I'm presenting from Sydney on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'm an inclusive user experience and service designer at the Centre for Inclusive Design, and I'm really excited to be part of AliCamp this year, so I'm just going to jump right in. When you think about user input during the development cycle, usability testing is at the top of mind. It's a tried and tested approach where we bring people in to do some of the most common or important tasks that are related to the product system and get them to interact with it. Maybe they're going to break it, but that way we can learn what works well and what doesn't. It gives us quantifiable and actionable data, and it highlights all the areas that we would need to remediate and iterate in upcoming dev cycles to make it easier to use. There's been a lot more usability tests being done remotely, unmoderated, and task-based. But the results from this kind of approach might not give us the full story when it comes to accessibility, usability, and inclusion. So today I'll be sharing some of my learnings about why these practices can miss valuable insights and how a more ethnographic approach can help us uncover more accessibility and usability findings. So, think back to the last time you were going to a new place and needed directions. Where were you going? How did you get there? Did you drive your car, ride your bike, just walk, or catch public transport? What did you use for directions? Was it a paper map as you were touring a new city? Or was it the Maps app on your smartphone or the GPS in your car? Were you alone or with someone else? And how important was it for you to get to the place? How were you doing for time? Were you in a rush or well prepared ahead of time? Maybe you just had to ask a nearby person for how to get there. So compare that scenario that you've just imagined to if I gave you this task. You're going to download a new navigation app, and then you are going to find your nearest cafe. The second example is missing a lot of the contextual elements that influence our experience with a particular product when in a real life scenario. We're missing all of the elements of emotion, the stress of a traffic jam, the excitement of meeting that person at that place, the fatigue at the end of a workday. It's missing your goals and motivations. How important is it for you to get there? If it was a job interview, it's best to get there on time. It's missing the other people involved, and whether that be your friends, family, your peers, your co-workers, and even people that you don't know. So the morning rush of everyone else trying to get to work, get to uni, send their kids off to school. It's also missing a lot of environmental factors that affect how you're feeling too. So it's much harder to figure out how to use a system when you're tight for time and under emotional pressure. And if you don't go to cafes, the location I've chosen for that task might not even be relevant to you. Context matters. And when usability tests ask people to complete tasks out of context, we get a much narrower perspective of a user's experience. And it means that the results are only telling half of the story. So I come from a health science background, and when we do science experiments, we need to make sure that the cause and effect of what we're observing is only because of what we're testing and measuring. So that means that all variables other than what we're testing has to be controlled. So using the same example of testing the navigation app in a science setting, each person should be using it on the same device with the same settings, using the same speed of internet, and performing the exact same tasks with all the same resources. And they should have the same capability when it comes to how comfortable they are with technology, their vision, their dexterity, and how confident they are with reading maps. And when the results come out and our hypothesis has been proven that yes, this works, they can find directions within 5 minutes, the features and the flow works, but we've only proven that it works under those particular test conditions. So our next step would be to repeat the experiment with variations to the conditions, one at a time, so that we can try to get as full a picture as possible. Which means that when we do usability testing, we actually only know whether it's working and if users are satisfied under the particular settings of that test environment. Have you repeated the the usability testing under different conditions? And have you considered the variety of contexts of your users? The reality is that our day-to-day lives are full of uncontrollable external and internal variables, and our situations are constantly changing. So it's almost impossible to simulate all of the unique elements of context that are related to a product. But if we can consider the diversity of people's contexts, then our findings will be able to have a fuller picture of real-world mismatches between user needs and product features. Ideally, what we'd want to do is bring the prototype to a person's natural environment and observe their interactions there during a very relevant moment. So we want to see how someone uses Uber Eats when they're hungry, haven't had time to cook, and crave pizza now. An ethno approach. But how can we work around this when we can't go into field during remote testing? I found that a moderated approach with that ethno lens can help us uncover richer and more relevant findings compared to an unmoderated and more structured task-based approach. So let's talk through why this works with a case study example of how I use the approach when doing usability testing of a government website. Firstly, who to test with. At Centre for Inclusive Design, we always look for the people who experience the most difficulty when accessing or using what's being tested because of a range of unique contexts. These perspectives give us a lot richer insight into what's not working and how to make things easier. So for the government website, our participants included someone who's learning English and comfortable with simple tasks on the computer, but not okay when they need to troubleshoot. Also spoke with a person who uses assistive software to read text aloud because it helps with their concentration, not because they have a vision impairment. Also spoke with an elderly person with declining vision who's confident with digital products and actually prefers to self-serve digitally. And to find these people, we looked at some of the contexts which can make the website difficult to use, like a person's English and digital literacy, their level of vision, cognitive processing, and also their internet connectivity. Also note that I also spoke with secondary participants, with the participants. So some people don't usually do things alone, which means that we can also involve their carers, social workers, and family members during the test. Moving into the how. I found it really effective to start usability sessions off with a casual interview. And in particular, I'll ask about the last time that they interacted with the digital product that we're testing or a similar one. And I asked them to describe what they did, what for, where, how, just like we did at the beginning. Yes, our memory is faulty and the story is often rewired and pieced together depending on who our audience is. But by asking the person to reflect and describe their previous interactions, it helps us bring the context back into the conversation. And that context also acts as a baseline for comparison. As humans, we use relativity as a way to make decisions and judgments. What we think is the best pizza is only the best pizza because we've compared it to other pizzas that we've had in the past. This conversation also helps break the ice to reduce observation bias. Now, we all act differently when we know someone's watching us. It's uncomfortable, just like being in front of the camera. But the more at ease a person feels by having that casual interaction before the test, then the less of that effect there is. So now when we move into the usability part of the session, the tasks that I asked them to try are the activities that they've shared with me during that initial conversation. Being guided by the participant on what tasks we're testing means that they're doing things that they would normally do, making it much more relevant to their real world situation. It also means that we can uncover some of the alternative uses which we hadn't considered before and understand how the product really fits into the rest of their world. Another note is I've seen a lot of new remote testing tools where there are specific requirements to participate. As an example, it will only work on Chrome and the most up-to-date version of Chrome, or you need a particular operating system. And this can be really difficult for some people to participate in those sessions because it forces them to be outside of their element if it's not what they're used to. So it's important to let people use the devices that they usually use and that they're most comfortable with so that the results truly reflect people's behaviors. So here are some of the things that we found using this approach on that government website. So the client already knew that the navigation was a bit loopy, taking users around in circles across the website. But what we validated was that it was also the density and complexity of the information that made it more confusing. What this means is that iterating the user flow and the buttons, the links, isn't enough to resolve customer pain points. The language of the content needs to be simplified in parallel to make the website easier to use. A lot of work was also done on the prototype to simplify the homepage. But what we found was that it was actually more important to fix the size and contrast of the breadcrumbs as well as the usability of the navigation ribbon and sidebar, because people didn't go onto the homepage to browse for their next step. They started from Google and did a search, and the first point of landing is actually on a content page. So these elements were really important to help users orient themselves. Some also depended on other people to teach them how to use the website, and they then follow the exact same steps each time they go back to use it, which means that any new changes to features or layout will really disrupt how well they're able to use this the next time they're on. So we know that change management will be really important to consider in the rollout of the next iteration. Because our users use their own devices, we observed that one person always had their web browser on 125% zoom so that the text is easier to read. Others often also needed to zoom in because the font size was quite small in some places across the site. But when you were zooming up, there were some elements which didn't respond to zoom, getting in the way of important content as well as menu buttons. And so you get people's behavior zooming in and out, which meant that responsiveness to zoom became one of the priorities for future development. So that's the great thing about this sort of approach. But I'm aware that we can uncover it has the possibility to open a can of worms. And I'm still in the process of learning, experimenting, and refining this approach. But if you're looking to test functionality and have really specific focus areas, then the usual structured task-based usability testing is great. You get a yes or a no of whether the feature is easy to use, and that way it can inform the rest of your development cycles. But if you're looking for a more holistic understanding and a fuller picture, what I've learned is that this approach can help us go beyond usability and find those really valuable insights into clues about accessibility issues and deeper usability issues which might be missed otherwise. And as we all know, by finding these early, we can save the cost of retrofit later. And it can also help us find any dependencies to prioritize functionality in our upcoming dev cycles. So to recap on how we can go beyond usability during these test sessions. Context really matters, and we can bring this context back in if we're not able to go into the field by asking people about their past interactions and setting that scene. We want to test with people who have a wide range of unique contexts, because these diverse perspectives will help us piece together a fuller picture of how the product will behave, or how people will behave with the product in the real world. And finally, being guided by the users to decide which tasks we're actually testing and let them choose their preferred devices means that the results really reflect their behaviors. So thanks for listening, and I hope you found something useful to bring into your current work practices.
AliCamp 2021